I'm Robert Long, curator of the Desoto County Museum. Welcome. We have an outstanding collection of artifacts and museum exhibits to show for you today. Ms. Charlotte Davis is our longtime volunteer. As you enter the museum, we have installed several safety features. We have built this beautiful plexiglass wall, if you will, that is transparent, so it doesn't hinder one's view once you approach the museum. But this is a holding area. It's a holding area for tourists, which we get, Ms. Charlotte, from Chile and Argentina and Switzerland and Coldwater. There's places all around here, across the sea, across the pond, as they say, and just down the road. We are Mississippi's best small museum. We were accorded that honor in 2003. We have continued to build upon the investment that our board of directors has made and the people of DeSoto County have made in our museum. We do receive support from the county and from the cities. But we are tasked with preserving that history. What a rich history it is. So if you will go ahead and take my temperature and see if I have a temperature. Am I good?
You're good.
I'm good. That's great. Well, some of the time I'm good, right?
Well, okay.
All right. Well, if we'll walk this way, and I will treat you all as I would any tourist coming into our museum. We are going to begin our presentation, our tour, if you will, with this gentleman. Now, many of you know that this is the very famous Spanish explorer, Hernando Desoto. Desoto comes to this area up from Florida, up from Mobile, and up through Alabama, winds his way up here in 1541. Now, he came here in search of gold. He did not find any gold, but what he discovered was far more significant. The largest waterway in all of North America that would literally transform our country forever, both in literature, in music, in geography, in transportation. The mighty Mississippi, of course, is the crown jewel of the waterway systems in our country. He also encounters our two indigenous Native American tribes, the Chickasaw and the Choctaw. If I was going to speak to you in the Chickasaw language, I would say Chuckma, which means hello. Or if I was going to speak to you in the Choctaw language, I would say Halito, which also means hello. They were cousins. They are all part of the Muskahogean mother tribe, if you will. The Wachita, the Creek, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, they were all part of the mother tribe. They originally, about 5,000 years ago, anthropologists believe, came to the great Southwest, up from the Central Americas, over to this area. The Choctaw are primarily located in the Philadelphia region, or near Nanawaya, which is the Mother Mound in the eastern part of the state. The Chickasaw pretty much reigned supreme in this part of North Mississippi. Around Tallahatchie County and downward would be the Choctaw. But the Chickasaw still have a great affinity for this land. They still refer to us as the current residents of their cultural homelands. So we forged a really wonderful and warm relationship with the Chickasaw. So he comes here, and Hernando Desoto plays nice for about 2 weeks. About 2 weeks in, he decides he's going to enslave the Chickasaw. They're not going to hear any of that. And despite all the armor that he had and all of the military prowess that he possessed, he was not able to defeat the Chickasaw. They are known for being the unconquerable Chickasaw. So they chase him across the river. Not long after that, he begins to travel a bit further south along the river, and he dies probably of yellow fever. And his conquistadors did not want the Native Americans to know that he was dead, so they affixed sandbags on his corpse, and they sank him to the bottom of the river that he had just discovered. How about that? Now, as we make our way over here, this is a beautiful exhibit. This is an exhibit that was given to us by the Chickasaw Nation. We invited the Chickasaw, I say we, a couple of us who belong to the Chickasaw Trails Association, invited the Chickasaw Nation to take part in the 175th anniversary of Hernando's founding. Took a couple of tries, because again, we are named for their arch nemesis, DeSoto, who changed their world forever. But they finally accepted, and when they came down, we had about 450 Boy Scouts, a large crowd out there that welcomed the chief when he came back to DeSoto County. First time that a Chickasaw had set foot on Mississippi soil in more than 175 years. He was accorded not one, but two 21-gun salutes, because the Chickasaw assisted us in the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, and also in the American Civil War on the side of the South. And that would cost them roughly $3 million when it came time for them to resettle in the Oklahoma Territory years later after they had been there for some time. This is a bison. No, Mississippi did not have native bison or buffalo, but our Chickasaw were nomadic. They hunted far and wide. They would go as far east as the Carolinas and as far north as the Ohio Valley. Our Native Americans never lived one single day in a teepee, not a single day. Their ancestors lived in a log hut, primarily up on a ridge to catch that cool breeze that comes through. And in the wintertime, a roundhouse or a packed mound house with a single chimney in the middle, and the family would huddle around there for heat and cooking purposes. But this is Brownie the buffalo, and we named this for one of our founders. The Browns, Mr. Wynn Brown, Mayor Wynn Brown, and Miss Annie Ruth Brown are among the founders of our museum, along with a whole host of people. But this honors the Brown family, and it was actually picked, we had a couple of names, and Brownie the Buffalo won out, so we're thrilled about this. The Arts Council kids helped us develop the natural habitat for Brownie to be positioned upon. She was in storage for years. And so we brought her out. We're proud she's out here for everyone to see. Now this over here, this dates back about 1,000 years into the Mississippian period. This is some of the oldest pottery belonging to the native Chickasaw. But we actually have artifacts in the museum that are older than that. And if my good friend and cameraman would come this way, I'll show you our Jewish history room. And in here, we actually have artifacts. I'll skip over here for just a minute. These are actually 2,000 years old. This is a pottery oil lamp and an oil dipper that dates back to the time of Christ, back to the 1st century. More than 2,000 years ago, an architect, Doug Thornton, who is another great supporter of the museum, decided to display these very precious and rare artifacts here. And they are part of the anchor exhibit of this particular room. We have some beautiful things. Our friend Walt Starr, who is an aide to Congressman Trent Kelly, his grandmother were the Finks, and they were very famous. They developed what amounts to shock absorbers for buggies and wagons. And Walt, is a picture of Walt's dad here with his grandmother, although he is a Christian, is able to share a part of his Jewish heritage. And we have found that the Jewish History Room, with the Christian influences here, unites the two faiths. And it really gives rise to us being able to showcase the partnership that we have between the Jewish community and the Christian community. Now this gentleman over here, this would be Joseph Goodman. He was a beloved founder of the Goodman family here in Desoto County in about 1870. And he was so beloved that he was invited by the Masons, which was almost unusual for a Jewish man, to become a member. And not only was he a member, he rose to the rank of senior warden. And this is a shofar that would be used to call the Jewish faithful to their religious services. This is a menorah or a Hanukkah. And the most beautiful thing is, it's from Coldwater. You see a Jewish icon from Coldwater. The Jewish settlers who began maybe as peddlers, some were goldsmiths or silversmiths, but they were in Mississippi dating from the 1840s. It's truly amazing. And he would have a general store, a dairy. His family would be go on to great renown in Memphis. And we're just very honored that they were a part of our DeSoto County history early on. Now we'll move this way here. This little critter is a red fox. And this would be one of the creatures that DeSoto would have encountered. And the native Chickasaw called red foxes Chulahoma. Hence, that is the name of the road here in DeSoto County. Byhalia is a Native American name, as is Centobia, which means white sycamore tree. So we have many, many of our Native American place names that still exist in the year 2020. It's truly amazing. We'll walk this way. You know, we leave our Jewish history and our Native American history and enter the Unknown Child exhibit for a good reason. Each of these two diverse ethnic tribes, if you will, were displaced. they were uprooted from and persecuted from the lands of their native origin. So it is not happenstance, it is with careful planning that we position these two exhibits side by side. But we'll move on in here. This exhibit, the Unknown Child exhibit, has literally been seen by thousands, not only here in DeSoto County, by school children. That's part of our task. The schools come here in droves. Even though we're in the middle of the COVID epidemic right now, we've already heard from teachers trying to find out when we can get the kids back in here again because they learn so much. Now, our exhibit, as with all of our exhibits, is local. We had two local GIs. Who were among those who helped liberate the camps in Auschwitz and some of the other internment camps during the Second World War. This affected them so greatly that years later, decades later, they began opening up about the horrors that they had seen, and they began to share that in measured terms with young people. And it so impressed the young people, they went out and raised 1.5 million pennies, one for each of the children who died or were murdered during the Holocaust. So it's a very moving experience, and as you go through, you will see their holograms of the children. And I don't want to give too much away because we want people to come into the museum and see, but it's very haunting, it's very beautiful, something so tragic. There's a poignancy about it. There was heroism within the camps. There were acts of humanity within those camps, and it has enriched my life just being associated with this exhibit, and we are honored to play that part as a host. All right, we're going to move over this way here, and I tell young people there were no ATMs back in the day. If you wanted something that someone else had, kind of like trading your peanut butter and jelly sandwich for a hamburger or a bologna, you traded beads and trinkets and things of that nature for something of value that someone else had. That was not unlike our early explorers here in DeSoto County, these are bells, actually were on the oxen. These are beads, there's a pipe. So you would trade these items. There was trade between the Native Americans and the early explorers. Moccasins that they walked on when they left here during the Trail of Tears in 1834, 1837. Mortar and pestle to grind up herbs. Also grain to make meals. This rattle is used in a religious ceremony, and this is almost like lacrosse. This is stickball. And if they could not settle their disputes on the battlefield, they would settle the game of stickball, but it was a rough game of stickball, I assure you. We'll come over this way, and this is Little Emma. Little Emma is the printing press for the DeSoto Times-Tribune, which is Mississippi's second oldest newspaper. It was founded, the paper was, in 1839. This beauty here was up and running about 1883, but it would work tomorrow if you oiled it up, and unlike that word processor that you have from the 90s, you just had to kind of chunk in the gulch. You could get this up and running, but it's very rare to have a working press from a paper that old, so we're thrilled to have that with us. This is the Sprague. The Sprague was a mighty vessel that plowed the waters of the Mississippi River. You would have cotton all stacked up here. You would have passengers waving and doffing their hats and waving their scarves. It was the mode of transportation. This vessel would burn on the Vicksburg Wharf in 1974. I know because 1 week after I visited it, it burned to the ground. And it is literally seared into my memory, no pun intended, because it was just so big, even for a little 9-year-old kid. A beautiful, majestic boat. And now they're replicas that are not made of wood anymore, that make them a little more safe. Now we get over here, and this is important, and people say, Robert, why do you have a tree stump? This isn't just any tree stump. This mighty pine tree stood in the front yard of Miss Annie Ruth Brown up on Nail Road, and it was believed to be Mississippi's largest pine tree when a storm felled it. Now again, it has a history that goes back further than that. Pine trees are not native to this part of Mississippi. They're everywhere now. But back in the day, this particular variety would have come from the southern part of the state. And you might ask, well, how in the world did it get up here? A robber, if you will, named Rube Burroughs, a lot of times would stuff a pine seedling in his pocket. He would rob some stagecoaches along the Natchez Trace. And he would come up here and he would plant trees in front of homes. And if he planted a pine tree in front of your house, you were safe. But he would also plant his gold and bury his gold up here and put a pine tree out, so he would come back 3 years later, almost like our cameraman who's a banker. It was like a bank. He knew he could find his gold because we didn't have that many pine trees. So it's a fascinating story that a Johnny Appleseed, if you will, was a former stagecoach robber turned, I guess, a horticulturist or something of that nature. We asked people to come to the museum to guess what this is. This is Colonel Thomas White's bathtub. People guess it's a coffin. We get all kind of crazy stuff. If you were somebody, if you had resources and means, you had a bathtub, Miss White had a bathtub. If you were regular folk, where'd you bathe? Young people love this. You bathed out in the creek. Out in the creek. You had somebody probably standing guard for you. But you were bathed in the creek, and you bathed with lye soap that was so strong, it would literally take the hide right off of you. Now, even though this majestic, beautiful home, this 28-room mansion that was up here where Fred's Dollar Store used to be, is no more. It was going to be reassembled, and that deal fell through. We have the beautiful parlor furniture, silk damask furniture, this beautiful piano. There's only 3 in existence. This beautiful velvet piano stool used to be bright red. But like Mr. Long's hair, time has changed the color. We tell young people, if you want to see how time can change things, look at this piano stool. Beautiful, beautiful wood in the piano. This mahogany bookcase is just beautiful, tall and majestic. Horsehair tufted chair that Confederate President Jefferson Davis could have sat in because it was by the parlor, and he was known to be a frequent visitor to the home. He did visit DeSoto County. He had business interest in Memphis, and he would stay. There's recorded visits by him to DeSoto Countyans. Well, come in here. This is our Civil War exhibit, and we have already done some things in here. We have recorded the battle sounds, which, due to COVID, that process of them actually being packaged and put all together has kind of been delayed. But we hope to stage at least a part of the Civil War in this museum. Now, we have had other museums try to buy these out from under us. The first hour, the first day of the first battle of the entire Civil War at Fort Sumter, South Carolina, these artillery shells were fired. And Mr. Wilson of Wilson's Mill, a very old family here, he brought these back. And here is one of the shells in 1920. It was more than 85 years old then. These are beautiful. Children can actually reach out and touch history. It's truly amazing. We don't keep them behind glass. They didn't think the war would last long. It would last 4 long years. And we'll move on across this way. If you've ever been out to the old Witten place, owned by Eddie Burks now, you'll know that a skirmish happened out there. And no, it wasn't a major battle, but it was important for all kind of reasons. We had 3 generals from DeSoto County. We had Pat Anderson, we had James Chalmers, and we had Nathan Bedford Forrest. They were charged with interrupting the Union Army's attempt to just sweep down the entire western side of the state and take Vicksburg. Well, we know that his guerrilla forces, G-U-E-R-I-L-L-A, I try to explain to young people there were no guerrillas at that time. You have to kind of tell them little things like that and they laugh. But they were charged with disrupting the forces. And literally, because of that disruption, Grant was forced to go all the way around to Vicksburg, shell the city, and take it that way. And as you move this way, we're kind of pressed for time, but if you move this way, we have bullets, we have the American flag, yes, we have the Confederate battle flag, we have more than 70,000 Mississippians who fought under it. It is a controversial banner. It is inside a museum. We know that we've got a new flag that's coming in the fall. We look forward to that, where we can display that flag and the flag that flew before. In this museum, we don't try to slant history one way or the other. We just try to tell it straight on. We just try to present history as it occurred. And that's the best way, and let people make up minds for themselves. We'll move this way. This is our yellow fever exhibit, and yes, we're living through a terrible time. But this yellow fever would claim more than 20,000 lives in the Mid-South, several right here in the Hernando and Greater DeSoto County area. This was a typical parlor suite from that time period. We have a yellow fever widow that we have got the mannequin for. She's actually going to tell the story. We're going to automate her of the deaths in her family. It was terrible, caused by mosquitoes. They didn't know that. So it will be a very poignant story. The twin engines of our economy, cotton and dairy. We at one time had more dairy farms than any other county in North Mississippi. Dr. Johnson over in the Olive Branch area was the last farmer, or Mr. Johnson over in the Olive Branch area was the last dairy farmer that we had. Sharecropping would replace the plantation-style form of agriculture that we had, and it would contribute, black and white, incomes for people to eke out a living all the time from Reconstruction all the way up until the 1930s when mechanized machinery replaced farm workers. All right, let's move this way as we're hurrying along here. This is a boat, largest boat in the museum. This would be used for recreation, passing by these great breech loading rifles. We've got a lot of recreational artifacts. This was used for commercial fishing and also for recreation. Outboard motors off because during the Second World War, which is the vintage of this particular boat here, you couldn't run your boat motor every day. Most of the gasoline went to the tanks and the planes overseas fighting the Axis powers. Now this is our law enforcement exhibit that we promised when we came here. Before we just had a motorcycle. There's far much more to our law enforcement history than a motorcycle. So we've added quite a few things. Hop Durden's collection. Randy Durden gave us, Hop Durden's a famous constable. This is his dad's hat, his badge, his holster, his handcuffs, his binoculars, all kinds of things. Burma Hobbs, we have a picture of Burma Hobbs, the legendary Burma Hobbs. He was a very famous constable. Some people said he was Barney Fife on steroids. Little bitty guy, but boy, I tell you, he was 10 foot tall and bulletproof, they say. We have Ray Richardson, who was the first African-American deputy sheriff, also part of the exhibit. And over here, you can guess who this belongs to, Jerry Lee Lewis, who has lived in Desoto County since 1973. This is his piano. This is the fringe jacket that he wore on Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. These are his gold. This is his record, Great Balls of Fire, an original 1955 pressing. Signed autographs, his watch that Sam Phillips gave him. We actually have quite a few more items here than they even do at the Lewis home. So it's worth that. Get this. The museum is free. We do accept donations. We couldn't keep this place operating if we didn't. But where else can you may pay $30 for a tour somewhere else. Bring your family. Come see us. Look at here. You can actually hear Memphis Minnie. Bonnie Raitt would play this record over and over and over and would model her music on Memphis Minnie, would pay for her tombstone along with John Fogerty, who I'm a big CCR fan, so that endears my heart to them. All right, we'll move around here as we're making our way. There's so much to see here. We'll have to do part two. We don't just tell the nice things that happen in this county. We tell all of it. James Meredith, a famous civil rights legend, was shot just south of here. He would survive. He would go on, of course, to great renown. He's told his story. Every time he's here, he draws a huge crowd. This is a Westinghouse television that we found in a home here in Hernando that Archives and History is going to give us the technology to show that on this old television. So I had to find a vintage television to be able to show that. Our African American exhibit shows the rich history and the resilience of our African American citizens throughout slavery, throughout segregation. There's actually a slave deed up here from 1846, very rare. Bob Barber in town has loaned that to our collection. And as we move this way, quilts, rare quilts. If you watch Antiques Roadshow, you know how valuable these are. Moving in this area, Dr. Seymour gave us this beautiful dentist chair from Dr. Williams. This is authentic. And let me tell you, this was considered as absolute perfection as far as these are so natural looking. And Dr. Williams was renowned for the manufacture of his false teeth. So we have a lot of surgical instruments too that are kind of sharp. We don't want to put out where kids can get them. but they're going to go under glass, which we'll take in a minute and show our other exhibit. Mr. Cameraman, how much more time do we have?
8 minutes.
8 minutes. We got perfect time. We'll kind of walk through here. We have exhibits from South Haven, Horn Lake, Olive Branch. This is Horn Lake's 1902 mailbox, Nesbitt's 1905 mail station. We have exhibits here from Hernando. This is from the Olive Branch newspaper. I have to show you this room in here, but I got to stop here. This is one of our nine new exhibits. Sue Whitten of the All-American Redheads could seek a hook shot for the bleachers, kind of like the Harlem Globetrotters. Well, this package arrives in Sacramento, California. Her signed Converse sneakers, her beautiful warm-up jacket, almost like it was from yesterday, but beautifully preserved. Her family wanted their items in our museum. And it is truly our. It belongs to the entire community. So we have sports artifacts from the River Kings. Maddox Foundation has been tremendous to us. Northwest is represented. Really, we tell the story of all of DeSoto County from the time it was discovered by DeSoto all the way up into here. Now, Mr. Cameraman will come in here. Bar none, this is our most famous room. This is a typical living room from the era back in the day. You will hear Franklin Roosevelt come on the radio in just a minute and tell you about the bombing of Pearl Harbor. But before we depart this room, Dr. Henry Wadsworth and William had donated the most beautiful collection. It is our newest exhibit, the Wadsworth collection of medical artifacts. So I want you to come and visit this room. This is dedicated to our veterans, but I don't want time to elapse without showing you this beautiful medical exhibit. So we'll go this way. We'll make our way through here.
In infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked.
We have truly saved the best for last. As you can read, from cholera to coronavirus, keeping DeSoto healthy, the history of healthcare in DeSoto County, Dr. Henry M. Wadsworth Senior Collection and Emerson Family Collection. The Emersons, the Wadsworths were among probably the two most prominent physicians that we had here, the late Malcolm Baxter as well. We hope to have some of his artifacts, and we'll talk with our friend Donna about maybe getting some of those things. This is a medical skeleton, a Caucasian skeleton from the 1930s. The reason I emphasize that, it is illegal to display Native American bones anymore. This is a Caucasian skeleton that was used to see how the joints would work. Physicians would actually use these. Dr. Angus Emerson's medical bag from 1909. We have his surgical instruments in here as well. We have some potions and things that date back to that time period. A derby hat. Dr. Henry M. Wadsworth, a beloved figure in our community. He delivered no telling how many babies, as did Mrs. Wadsworth. But all these instruments, and Dr. Henry went through and showed us all. This is his daddy's medical bag here. For his Rotarians, this is important. This is Dr. Wadsworth's Paul Harris Fellow recognition. So we have a piece of Rotary that is represented here, in addition to photographs throughout of our Rotary Club. And of course, you know this gentleman, he's looking a little white-haired these days, but this is Dr. Henry. And this is the third generation of Wadsworths. This is William. So many of you go and see William. But so many of these, and I'm going to have to get Dr. Wadsworth down here to show you exactly what all of these instruments do, from tonsillectomies to taking out your appendix. It's all here. Come visit us. We're at 111 East Commerce Street in Hernando. This is truly a treasure. It's an honor for me to represent DeSoto County's rich history for you.